Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Media Professionals Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Springer. On today's episode, I'm joined by Jeremy Otto. Jeremy's a play-by-play broadcaster, freelancer, has a lot of different experience in a lot of different sports. And in today's episode, he'll discuss what his favorite sports are to broadcast, as well as how he got his start in broadcasting. All that and more. I hope you enjoy. Jeremy, thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of the podcast. How are you doing today? How are you doing?
Doing great. I actually just stopped on the side of the road here on my way to a gig, but that's our life, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I was going to go ahead and just start off with tell me a little bit about what you're doing now, what you've done in sports media. What's your job? What's your day-to-day life looking like right now in sports media?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of here, there, and everywhere. I do a lot of freelancing. So in the fall, it's a lot of high school football. I call a game of the week for the Detroit Catholic High School League here locally, which is, a pretty solid lead. Aiden Hutchinson graduated from that, 4 or 5 years ago for Novine Child, to give you a guy right there. So I'm doing that. I do United Shore Professional Baseball League as well. It's a local independent that plays at Jimmy John's Field in Utica, Michigan. Started up in the last 4 or 5 years, so they're really starting to get off the ground. In the winter, I do Detroit Mercy Basketball Division I here in town. Mike Davis is their coach. Antoine Davis is their star, his son. Been right up there in terms of leading the nation in scoring for the last 4 years of his career. So that's been fun to watch him break some records and the all-time scoring record and all that stuff. And then, a lot of stuff in between. So I've been in Chicago a decent amount lately, doing some DePaul softball, which has been fun. And a lot of freelancing, everywhere else. So that's kind of the nutshell of what I do.
Yeah, as you know, sports broadcasting, it's not a 9-to-5 job. How have you kind of managed your work-life balance? And obviously, as you said, with freelancing, kind of like maybe a more consistent schedule, how do you kind of keep that balance between work and life?
Yeah, it's a great question. I recently had a baby girl as well. She's going to turn 1 in just a couple weeks. So that, and on top of getting married over the last, 2-3 years and that, and life changing so much. So there's been a lot of that. But yeah, I think the most important thing is just, when you have time with your family, it's family time, right? If you have a couple days off, you definitely make priority with that. And I think from a very early age, I went to a high school in Detroit that was very studious and, required a lot of you, had a lot of homework. But I was calling games when I was in high school too. So I think from high school to college now to, starting a family as well. I've really, kind of honed in on those skills. And, obviously you're always working on that too. Just like, you're working on your craft too, to make sure you're dedicating, enough time to yourself as well.
How did you find yourself getting into sports broadcasting? Was there always an interest there, or kind of what got you sort of into the industry a little bit?
Yeah. So, I was a very shy kid growing up. So you talk to a lot of people who were around me, 7th, 8th, even 9th grade. They're like, wow, I never thought, you'd get into it like this. But, I started doing announcements over the PA in 8th grade. And I had one of my teachers, write on a notebook before I graduated, hey, maybe you'll get into radio one day. And I kind of look back and I think I kept it somewhere. I don't know, I've lost tabs of where it was, but and then, when I got to freshman year of high school, they were starting a little broadcast program there and looking for students to volunteer. And at first, for whatever reason, I only wanted to be the analyst. I was afraid to be the play-by-play. And then a couple seniors didn't show up to the game. It was a basketball game at the point, and I was the play-by-play. And then from that point is kind of what I point to jokingly, but not, I guess, as the start of it. Always had an interest in sports as I was growing up, so that helped. But and then, as I got to the middle of my high school career, if you want to call it, I think that's when I started to hone in on, maybe, this is something that I could do for a career.
So had there always been that interest in sports, like you said? Was it kind of that interest in sports and then maybe being closer to the game that kind of led you to down that path a little bit?
Yeah, I thought about trying out for baseball my freshman year of high school. And by that point, I had called the football season, I'd called basketball, I'd called hockey. At that point, I said, maybe I'll just focus on this and see where it goes. So I think that was the best thing for me. And who knows if I would have even made the baseball team, and I'm sure I wouldn't have made varsity at that point. But I think at that point, when I got the itch for it, when I got the feel for it, and I started doing some stuff for the Catholic League too, when I was a sophomore. I'm like, yeah, this is something that's cool. It's fun. It's different. And it's turned into a solid career so far.
What would you say is your favorite sport to work with or broadcast, or maybe what are some of the challenges of different sports that you work with?
Yeah, I always said very early on, baseball and hockey were my two favorites. Two direct opposites, right? One you have to fill a lot of time. One is just bang, bang, bang so fast. I haven't gotten a lot of opportunities for hockey, but I'm still open to it. I mean, I've called the state championship and in the last couple of years here in Michigan, and also called an OHL game just on a fill-in this past winter. So that was fun. But baseball is definitely up there. I think the ultimate goal, one of them would be Major League Baseball. I think that'd be awesome. NBA and or, high major basketball, high major football would be great too. So I think, those three sports are kind of the ones I've honed in, but I also, enjoy going to DePaul and calling softball, and I'm about to call the lacrosse state championships this year for the MHSA as well. So I like being able to bounce around to different sports and, just kind of keep that fresh, especially when you're freelancing. I think that's important.
Was there ever a moment where you just kind of sat back and thought, okay, yeah, this is something that I want to pursue even further, or this is the right place for me, or this is the right job for me? Did you ever have that moment where it just kind of clicked for you?
Yeah, I think you're always quote working on it, right? And COVID, I think for a lot of people was challenging. And I was just sort of, I was a couple of years out of college and, still figuring myself out professionally. But I think the interest still, charged through COVID, which if it charges through COVID, it can charge through anything, right? Just because there was nothing going on and I saw gig after gig collapse in a matter of, an hour or two. But I don't know. I think at some point in high school, when people started saying, "Oh, you do a good job at this," I'm like, "Oh, thank you." I haven't really done it before. It's something that's obviously takes a lot of skill, but I think that maybe pushed me through the grunt work and allowed me to keep working on it, knowing that they think he's doing an okay job at it, a good job at it, and I think just making some connections locally. The mentors in this business are huge, right? Because not only do they give you a boost sometimes in confidence, because it's a hard industry in terms of getting a job, keeping a job, finding the next job, knowing what to say to get those jobs, as I'm sure you've already figured out as well. But so I think the mentors played a big factor in that as well and helped me through it.
What's the best advice you've really gotten from somebody, like a mentor to you? What's the best advice somebody's given to you so far in your career?
Yeah, I've definitely had quite a few. One piece that I thought was interesting from a broadcaster who's doing stuff at a really high level, he always reached out to people. He chose one person a day, and just like anybody that tries to say they're going to do whatever. If we try to exercise every day, if we, try to reach out to somebody every day, are we going to do it every day? And like you say, yeah, some days I didn't do it, but most days I did. I reached out to, a fellow broadcaster, somebody in the industry, and just sent them my work. And so he never asked for a job, but he got to know enough people, and then people talked about him to other people, where he started getting network jobs and bigger jobs fairly quickly in terms of where he was before. So I thought that was interesting. So he said that, my one piece of advice is reach out to a bunch of people, but don't always ask for a job. What else? I think from the statistical standpoint, I've really learned from some of my one mentor that sticks off the top of my head. Dan Dickerson is the voice of the Tigers. I had a chance to intern with the Tigers in 2018 and work very closely with him. He really taught me, he's a big numbers guy, but at the same time, he's big into not, making those numbers garbled, right? It's just numbers after numbers after numbers when they, what's WAR mean to an average fan? What's this mean to an average fan? So he kind of has worked with me over the last few years. I talked to him a lot about, how you present those numbers and not presenting too many. So I think that's an important piece too.
You mentioned COVID as something that you kind of had to work through. What are some of the other challenges that you think you've faced really working in sports? Because sports, it's a very unique industry. What are some of the other challenges you face as a freelancer or just in the industry?
Yeah, I think just getting the jobs, right? I mean, that's a huge part. It can be a very frustrating part because you can reach out to so many people and maybe half of them don't respond, or some say I really like your work, but unfortunately we don't have anything, which can be frustrating itself, right? Because you're getting that information that you're doing a good job, but at the same time there's just nothing out there. And then the other part is too, like a lot of these jobs don't even get posted, right? So you're constantly scrolling through social media and see this person is leaving, so that means that job is available. But I think just steering ahead and remembering the end goal, and yeah, it's a lot of work, but also remembering, hey, we're calling a game for a living, right? Whether it's a high school, NAI, Division 1, Division 2, professional, whatever it may be, we're still calling a game and getting paid for it. So I think just staying on that right track and navigating what can be some long nights and some tough no's and some good yeses in terms of people along your way. I think that's probably the most challenging but rewarding when it works out.
What do you think are some attributes that someone needs to have in order to pursue play-by-play or broadcasting in the industry? What's something what to you is important to somebody who wants to continue in this industry?
Yeah, you hear everybody talk about preparation, right? Preparation is the key, and it certainly is. But also finding out how to preparing smart. You can spend hours and hours and hours in putting together a spotting chart and putting together notes, but it's ultimately, how you prepare them to help you, right? I mean, for example, football, the average person, lays out the wide receiver where the wide receiver goes, the quarterback where the quarterback goes. For me, that's not helpful. I want quick, I want to scroll down and find something quick. To me, I can't find it. Doesn't work with my brain that way for whatever reason. For basketball, I'll lay it out, like most people do, just the standard, by number, and you put the stats in the middle and the notes on the side. But for football, I kind of like to have it, organized by offense, defense, and then maybe a special team section too, and have it listed out by number. So I think that's one important thing is, figuring out how to prepare and what works for you. Everybody has their way of doing it. Everybody has an opinion about it, but if it doesn't work for you, it's not going to help you much to spend hours and hours on something that you've put together. Flexibility, I think, is something you hit on from the top, right? I mean, it's not a 9-to-5 job. So, I might get a call, as today. I got a call yesterday for a game today. You have to, you can't go crazy in terms of the amount that you prepare because you just learned about it. You want to do it justice and do everything you can. But it probably doesn't do you good to stay up until 5 a.m. and get no sleep before the game, that kind of stuff. But the flexibility is huge, knowing how to work in the family time and the personal time, I think as we've already talked about, is big as well. And, just having that grinder mentality. Really, to start your career, you're the guy on the outside of the roster looking in that's trying to make the team out of spring training, in a different way, right? You're trying to just grind and impress people as much as you can and do everything you can, and then even maybe you don't still get that job or you don't get that opportunity. So I think just knowing that is key too.
Thinking back to your first broadcast or your first day kind of on the job, what was that like? And what would you say to yourself maybe before you went into that first broadcast of your career?
Are we talking professionally or just my first broadcast ever?
Professional. I would say professionally. Your first professional broadcast, you're about to walk in. First of all, what was that broadcast like? And if you could maybe stop yourself before you went in there from right now, what would you say?
Yeah, so that's interesting. I tracking my first pro broadcast probably back to when I did high school football. I was still in college. I was a sophomore. The radio station called me and said, "Hey, we got your name from this person. Would you be interested in doing this?" I'm like, yeah, heck yeah. Still in college, looking to break into a huge market like Detroit. You get on the radio, terrestrial radio in the market. That was something. I think. I think really just stepping back and realizing how big of an opportunity that was. I think I realized it at that moment, but I think I probably could have relished it a bit more. Like, hey, this is an opportunity that can lead to other things, and it did. If you look back now, did you prepare enough? Did you do the right preparation? Did you give it justice enough? I was very lucky in that there was a veteran in the market who was working with me, and he said, hey, have him do the play-by-play. He could easily said, I'll do the analyst work, but he wanted me to get those reps, and he knew how important that was to me. So I think just, thinking about that moment too, and really maybe going back and thanking him again today, or a couple of years from now when, we're all where we want to be. I think that things like that is what you need for a career like this. So does that answer the question? I know that was kind of a roundabout way.
I mean, no, yeah, I think that was, but that make you nervous. You mentioned earlier how you wanted to be the analyst first, and then suddenly to have somebody say, you know what, you take the play-by-play. How did you feel about that? Did that make you kind of nervous at the time?
So the going back to the analyst, that was freshman in high school. This was like senior or sophomore in college. So maybe I think it actually gave me confidence, right? That somebody, who has this amount of experience and somebody I've maybe grown up listening to a little bit on the talk side said, hey, yeah, this guy, I've heard him. He does good enough work, put him on the play-by-play side. So I think more than anything, it may be, it made me confident. Now thinking back, the first time I was on the air with them, it dumped rain. This was after my car got totaled a week before because I was stuck in rain, and my dad had to drive me to the game. And the game got canceled, actually. So it was a lightning delay. So I got on the air for a little bit. We did some pregame stuff, sent it back to the studio, and then we never came back. So so that maybe kicked the nerves out a little bit. You were able to get on air and not really call the game. And then, then the next week you were able to do one. But yeah, so I think that's my thoughts on that.
As a broadcaster, do you maybe watch or listen to other games differently, knowing kind of maybe a little bit more behind the scenes or what it takes to prepare? Do you watch games differently? Do you listen to games on the radio differently now?
I think you do. You definitely do. I think there's moments where I try to separate that as well, just because I want to watch the game. Sometimes it's hard to actually see the content of what's happening. If you're watching your favorite team or whatever, when you're trying to analyze the broadcast. But I always try to, I do a lot of driving as I will do even today. And, I'll constantly click on Sirius XM. That's one of the big reasons why I keep subscribing to it, is to listen to all the different broadcasters. Baseball, especially, there's some guys I really like to listen to. John Miller with the Giants, and Dave Fleming do a really good job. And, the guys in Seattle I listen to quite a bit. So just kind of clicking through and seeing how this guy does it, seeing, who's who. And sometimes you're like, oh, I've never heard this guy before. It's interesting to hear how he calls the game. So I think you definitely do hear it. And, before you know it, you're doing it with a critical ear as well. Like that's something I do like. That's something I don't, which can help, I think, certainly for young broadcasters who are trying to establish their voice.
Do you try to mimic or emulate sometimes, you think, guys that you really like, or is there stuff when you listen to a game you think, wow, that was an interesting way, or that was cool? Do you try to incorporate that into your own broadcast sometimes?
You never try to copy right off, but I think one of the interesting / best things too that I've heard from people is, look, what you're going to say has been said before, whether you like to hear that or not. Has it been said in the inflection or your voice? No, but most things have been described in a certain way, right? Outside of maybe Doc Emmerich and some of the greats who are known for all their word choices. Most descriptions have been said. Most home run calls, have been said. It's interesting too. I've seen lately, like, oh, we don't want to hear home run calls on your demo because there's nothing. I've saw that a couple of times. I'm like, that's interesting to hear. I guess in a way, in hockey and some of the other sports, everybody says scores, right? Or he scores to a certain way in the same way. But and it's interesting. There's a few people I guess, quote, sound like, or I have a few inflections that are here locally, but I think you hear that from a lot of people that, whether they make it to the major leagues or they make it to the highest level, there's bits and pieces of everybody that they've listened to growing up, just because, and it's not necessarily something you do consciously. Maybe it's the way they say a phrase, or, just a certain punch they give the call. I hear that a lot from, certain, it seems like baseball is the thing that comes up, like, whoever your local announcer was, you sound a bit like them if you make it to the next level. So
yeah. So what is next for you? I mean, I know you're on your way to a broadcast right now, obviously, but where do you kind of see yourself down the road in the future? What do you think is next for you broadcasting wise? How do you hope to continue to improve? Kind of what's next for you?
Yeah, always looking to constantly improve. I think at this point you have to find a balance between constantly, dogging yourself to, you're not going to do everything perfect. We all know that right from the start. But I think you have a decent idea of how to critique and, take a few things into the broadcast that you might want to improve instead of 10 things, which can be overwhelming. And then you just start thinking about it. And every time you mess up, you're like, I did it again. But yeah, I don't know, just to constantly rise in my field, I guess is the goal. I'm very open to what the next step could be, whether that's high major basketball, pro, anything, anywhere. That's the versatility, I guess, that came up earlier, and having that ability to do multiple sports and have fun doing multiple sports. Because I guess the moment that you fully pigeonhole yourself into one thing, you could be missing out on another opportunity. But I think it is a good idea to hone in on, one particular thing if that's what you want to do. But so yeah, that's probably a roundabout way to answer the question. But I would be happy with most of the major sports doing them at the highest level.
Well, Jeremy, I know you've got a game coming up right now. I really appreciate your time pulling over to have a chat for today's episode. So good luck to you today. Thank you so much for being on, and good luck to you today and in the future.
Absolutely. And, feel free. And if any future broadcasters are listening, I'm always willing to talk to anybody. You can reach out to me on Twitter at Jeremy Otto PXP. That's at JeremyOtto PXP. Don't hesitate to reach out. I know how this industry is. The best part of it is the connections, and shoot me a message if you want.
Yeah. Appreciate that, Jeremy. Thank you so much. Good luck today.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.